Got some coffee. Good morning, y'all. Oi, oi, oi. I hope you guys are unclenching your jaw. Coffee and water. Be sure you have some water today. But today, we're going to be talking a little bit about, I don't want to call it drama because I don't think it's healthy to call it drama, but we're talking about what is a win in Dead by Daylight, hook states versus kills, and what this kind of conversation really means for the community. One thing I want to say is I don't want to see anybody bashing any content creators in my comments down below. I don't want to hear anybody going after any of the people that we're talking about in this video. If we're going to talk about the health of Dead by Daylight and balance of the game and the health of that balance, we have to also address the health of the community and the way that they behave. All right, so I don't want to see any of that stuff. Any comments that are bashing anyone else, we're just going to remove them. I'm not really doing it, so zero tolerance on that stuff. But I wanted to talk about what True Talent tweeted out recently. And True basically tweeted, he says he thinks that hook states should matter more than kills in Dead by Daylight, and that 4K win streaks sort of can hurt the game because they can end up ignoring 66.66 is what he quotes % of the objective by going for 4K win streaks. If you down everybody, once and they all fed and slugged, and then you put them on the hook, and then that hurts the game a little bit. And did you really win because you got 6 hooks instead of 12? That's kind of the conversation, right? Which is a noble stance and position to have. He's basically trying to say, hey, let's try to play the game as fairly as we can, right? Let's try to get as many hooks as we can. And if you get 10 hooks, say, hey, GG, it's a more fair game for your survivor cohorts and teammates and things like that. There have been people that have made addendums to his statement and said, that the developers balance the game around these 4K win streaks that Dowsey, Super Alf, otts gets, etc. And people don't think that that is fair. And Otts has responded to True because he was tagged in that Twitter thread that True put out. And basically he said that he's come back with some evidence. He took the time to run a basic build on every killer and get as many hooks as he can, averaging, I believe, 10.8 hooks per across all of the matches, and still getting 4Ks except on Blight. And he said that, he can go for as many hooks as possible, but does that change the conversation necessarily? So I think there's a few things we got to ask ourselves here. And, the 3 questions I want to bring up is, what is a win? What is balance, right? And do we need interpretation on what a win really is in Dead by Daylight? I want to kind of talk about these deeper concepts because we could talk about surface level hooks versus kills and things like that, but I want to talk about the concepts of why we're even having this discussion, right? So I want to talk about first, what is a win? Wins are obviously subjective. I think we've had this conversation a bunch of times. I think you're all smart, right? Wins are determined in my mind by what somebody needs from the game in that moment. And that is a cerebral concept, I think. But is the experience of just playing the game with your friends or playing as the killer role and playing as your favorite killer, is that satisfying enough for you to walk away and have a good day? Is your self-esteem, your self-worth, is who you are as a person, your identity hinged on how well you do in that game, is simultaneously the other side of that, right? Are you playing games to get a sense of accomplishment, to get a sense of value, a sense of competency, right? If you're not playing for those things, you may not care about the 4K. If you're playing just to enjoy the experience, you might get a 1K and be like, that's pretty dope, right? You might play Survivor and get sacrificed, but you had 3 good chases, and so you might feel pretty good about that, right? Simultaneously, if you are playing to feel a sense of competency and accomplishment and feel good about yourself, it might really matter to you to get as many hooks and kills as possible, because otherwise you might end up tearing yourself down or feeling like, oh, I could be doing better and things like that. So obviously, there's a lot of mental health nuance to this conversation, and we're not going to really dive into that because I'm not qualified to do those discussions, but I think it's really important that we ask ourselves, why do we care what a win is? There are also people that just take things at face value. Survivors survive, killers kill. People like Otts and Dowsey and Super Alf like to push their own personal limits. Maybe some people try to prove a point, some people don't, about getting better at the game, what you can use, what's viable, what's not viable. And, sometimes kills are their way of tracking that because you are a killer in the game. Killers kill, survivors survive. So again, there are all kinds of reasons why people do what they do. So I think we have to kind of look into people's backgrounds, what they need from the game to determine what a win is. And it's not on me to determine what a win is for you, right? I think we all have to be open to this discussion and decide for ourselves whether what we consider to be a win is even healthy for us as a person, right? Should we go in trying to be the best every time, or should we go in trying to enjoy the experience? What's more detrimental to us? So I wanted to talk about what is balance. This is a tough one. What is balance? That's question number 2 in an asymmetrical video game. All right, if we're thinking about asymmetrical, right, 4v1, we have Overwatch, which is a 6v6. If we look at something like Overwatch is constantly going through balance changes. They are constantly switching up killer power, or they're constantly switching up the powers of their heroes, their health bars, how big the health bars are, how many shield, like how much shield they have, how fast they get ult, etc. And if games that have 6v6 is going through balance changes, this game's always going to be going through balance changes as well. And it's a lot more difficult to do in an asymmetrical game. So I think we have to factor that in. There's 0 asymmetrical games that were perfectly balanced. There are 0 games that are perfectly balanced. Even in a game of chess where you could argue there is perfect balance, one person still goes first, right? So, and that's a much deeper conversation. There's a lot of nuance to that as well. But there was an article in Game of Sutra that I wanted to sort of quote here. And it says, it talks about game balance, but it says, gameplay is all about making choices. And in a poorly balanced game, many of the choices available to the player are essentially rendered useless. And this, in a nutshell, is why game balance is so important. It preserves your game elements from irrelevance. In an imbalanced game, one or more dominant strategies quickly emerge, limiting other strategies useless except for some unintended purposes, such as getting used as a handicap mechanism or comedic reason. Compounding the problem of balance in games is the fact that a game can actually be balanced at the professional level, but imbalanced at the intermediate level, meaning sometimes a strategy will be way too powerful, a dominant strategy, at all levels of play except for the very highest. Ideally, you want your game to be balanced at all levels, but for a modern video game of even average complexity, that's asking a ton. It's best to figure out what you want your game to be and then focus your balance efforts towards that. So before we even dive into the conversation of what is balance, we have to ask, who is behavior targeting in attempting to balance the game? High-end or intermediate players, or new players? I'm going to hedge my bets on the fact that they are targeting intermediate players. I'm talking right around probably rank 11 down to rank 5, maybe 4, right? Somewhere in that middle minutia. People who've had enough time in the game to really push through rank 10, which is a small percentile of players, all the way to people that are getting on that cusp of being very, very good, right? Because rank doesn't matter until we start having discussions about how good somebody is at rank 10 who's fresh to rank 10 versus somebody who's played the game for 5,000 hours and is consistently rank 1, all right? Hours and rank matter until ranks go away. So I think the game is being balanced towards the middle section of players. The reason I think so is, quite simply, if the game were balanced for the top percentile of killers, every killer would be nerfed into the ground. Maps would not have gotten smaller recently. We look at the game. Infinite loops were taken out. A lot of windows were adjusted or given doors as early as last April, I believe. Generator speeds were slowed down. People grouping up on gens was slowed down. Maps have been made to be smaller than they used to be. The map reworks have made it so that survivors are having sort of weaker loops, especially on maps like Ormond, right? The game is balancing itself and skewing a little bit more towards killer. It used to be very difficult to play killer. Impossible? Not necessarily, but very difficult to play killer. And it is getting easier to play the killer role. Why would the killer role get easier if the top players are making it look already easy? That is a paradox. That is a dichotomy that is unsolvable. It's a question that can't solve itself unless we just say that that's not where the game is being balanced for. The game is being balanced so that more people take up the killer role in the middle levels and have a better time playing and want to stay in it, whether that's to keep queues rolling, whether that's so that people spend more money on new killers and things of that nature. Those are unknowable factors on my end. If we acknowledge that the game is because the game is being balanced, we have to acknowledge that both sides get balanced. And I want to go ahead and clear the air before I hear anyone in the comments. Both sides get balanced, all right? Survivors have had nerfs as early as last year, and the map reworks, each map rework is a nerf in and of itself. killers get nerfed all the time. Their powers get nerfed quite frequently. And we see that, we have things like Hex Undying and Pop Goes the Weasel being nerfed, D-Strike is being nerfed, Object of Obsession is being changed. The game is being balanced to be made more intermediate player friendly. And I think based on stats, which nobody likes to look at or say matter, but they do matter to some degree, based on stats, the game is getting close to being as balanced as it could be. Most people are getting between 2 and 3 kills in their matches, mostly scaling towards the 2 kills per match across all ranks. And then when we get to red ranks, we see that people are getting between 2 and 3 up in the 60 to 70 percentiles, a little bit closer to the 3K more frequently. Are we balancing to the top percentile of players, or are we balancing towards kind of the median percentile? And I just think that the median percentile is closer to being balanced than anything. And I think that that's very important. I think we really have to be careful putting creators on such a pedestal that as to blame them for any potential number of changes that get made to the game. I think that that is not healthy, because at that point they could be blamed because of the potential for people to watch them and then be on forums or something like that, which makes them basically culpable for anything people don't like. And that's a slippery slope that we have to be careful that as a community we don't go down. I don't think that makes really a lot of sense, right? And again, as well as a lot of these top percentile people play, if we're talking about balance of the game, and Ott said it best, if we're talking about the game being extremely balanced, at the red ranks, the best ranks, you would fight and claw and scratch your way to getting a 2K. And that would mean that the intermediate players are maybe getting 1 if they're lucky. And new players, be damned. Even if survivors were also equally as bad as new players probably have a really tough time, right? So is that the balance we want? I don't know. I think we're living in the golden age of DBD balance. As cynical as people get, the game used to be very different, and it used to be a lot harder. Nobody wants to admit that. And that's how it used to be. The rose-tinted glasses aside, the frustration and cynicism aside, we're as close to balance as I think we've ever been. That's my opinion, of course. But question number 3 is, do we need more interpretation on what a win is? Do we really need behavior to say, this is what a win is? A win is 9 hooks, or a win is a 3K plus a hatch. No, and it wouldn't actually fix or solve anything if they came out and said what a win was, because there would be still people out there that get frustrated when one survivor escapes via doors. There would be people that get 9 hooks and 0 kills and get frustrated. There would be people that love getting 3 great chases and then dying as a survivor. It's still personal. So does it matter that we have a clear directive? No. I think that it kind of shows that we have, I don't think anybody necessarily wants to control what other people do. I generally try to be a nice killer. I really do. If I'm playing the game and I see that the team's not doing super well, they all get slugged really early, then okay. Sometimes, in some cases, I'll go through and hook everybody once, and I have to try to go out of my way to be sure everybody gets hooked once and we have a good match. But if a survivor team's really in there and they're very good, I don't think that going through and hooking everybody one time is, for me, I want to try to get at least a 3K. That's my win condition. So I'm going to go in there and try to win, and try to get that 3K, which means I'm going to maybe slug this person and go after this other person. But the teams that are really good, the really good survivors, don't mind if I necessarily slug somebody most of the time, because they expect it, because they know how to play around it. And that's where skill is such a big part of this conversation, is the people that don't have the skill, or they don't think they can ever have the skill, get frustrated about things that they don't think is fair. And that's where we talk about, again, the balance of, preserving elements from being irrelevant, slugging, camping, tunneling, which is a conversation for another day. But I think at the end of the day, the game is as balanced as ever. I think at the end of the day, the game is as balanced as it's ever been. I don't think it benefits us or behooves us to really get into the minutia about what is a win. I don't think it's beneficial for True to tell people that their win streaks maybe don't matter as much because they didn't get 12 hooks or 9 hooks, they got 8. Not that I think that that's necessarily what he's saying. So with regards to what is a win, what's balance, and do we need further interpretation on what a win is, do we need clarification? That's what I feel. What do you guys think in the comments below? This is a long video, but I kind of like these videos. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I missed any marks or missed any points. I don't believe we did, but I would love to hear your perspective. And I'll pray to the entity to see you guys, of course, in the next video. So